Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are jumping straight into a survival briefing for what is arguably one of the most notoriously punishing sections you're ever going to encounter in Dark Souls. We're heading right into the damp, dark, and downright deadly labyrinth known as the Depths.
Specifically, we're going to answer a pretty horrifying question. What actually happens when an immortal dragon gets a little too hungry? We're going to explore the twisted lore, the deadly mechanics, and the strategic solutions hidden in the absolute lowest levels of the Undead Burg.
So here's our agenda for today's briefing. First, the deaths and the curse. Second, how to cure curses. Third, a dragon warped by greed. And finally, number 4, slaying the gaping dragon.
All right, Section 1, the Depths and the Curse. Let's begin our descent into a place where the environment itself honestly feels like it was meticulously designed just to test your sanity.
As you navigate this maze, you're going to quickly run into these things. Basilisks. They're these bizarre frog-like enemies with giant bulging eyes, and they are your absolute biggest threat down here. They don't even need physical damage to ruin your run. Instead, they emit this terrifying, lingering green fog that builds up your curse meter. Here's the kicker. If that fog actually fills your meter, you don't just die instantly. It gets so much worse. You revive with a brutal 50% permanent health penalty. You'll literally see a skull replace the humanity counter on your screen. You can't reverse your hollowing, you can't kindle bonfires, and if you were hoping to summon some friends for help, yeah, you're completely out of luck. And if you think a 50% penalty is rough, check this out. Back in the day, before patch 1.05, the curse effect could actually stack upon death. The first death dropped you to half, the second to a quarter, and the third dropped you to an agonizing 1/8 of your total health. Just a tiny sliver of health. It was a completely devastating mechanic. Which brings us to Section 2, how to cure curses. Getting cursed is basically a shared trauma among the community, so let's look at how to fix it. If you do fall victim to that green fog, here is your medical checklist. The most common fix? Buying a purging stone. You can trek all the way back up to the Gargoyle Bell Tower and buy one from Oswald of Karim for 3,000 souls, or hit up the female undead merchant in the Aqueduct, though she charges double at 6,000 souls. If you're strapped for cash, you can trade a cracked red-eye orb to Snuggly the Crow back at the Undead Asylum, and finally, if you're feeling brave, you can run through the ghost-infested New Londo ruins and pay Ingrid a single humanity to break it. You know what's really fascinating, though? How the community actually responds to this mechanic. Over on the Dark Souls Reddit, players lovingly view this grueling setback as a rite of passage. One player shared this hilarious story of being completely defenseless, wielding a broken weapon, lost in the maze with half health. It's a harsh lesson in preparation, right? It teaches you to either stock up on purging stones or boost your curse resistance before ever heading down. Moving right along to Section 3, a dragon warped by greed. With our curses cured, we now have to face the massive architect of this area's misery. To really understand our target, we first need to look at its ancestors, the everlasting dragons. Now, this was a superior, immortal race of mineral-based life forms that actually predates humanity. They possessed these majestic stone scales and ruled the world before the advent of fire and disparity. Most of them were completely wiped out in an ancient war. But one distant descendant managed to survive by retreating to the lowest depths to escape the onslaught. In an interview, designer Hiroshi Nakamura explained that the emergence of life and emotion corrupted this particular survivor. Driven by unrelenting gluttony and greed, it adapted purely to consume. It retrogressed so much that it doesn't even eat with a traditional mouth anymore. It takes food directly into its massive, transformed body just to survive that desolate environment. I absolutely love how director Hidetaka Miyazaki approached this design too. When he gave his artist the prompt of greed, he was expecting something, well, fat. Instead, Nakamura delivered this total nightmare. Miyazaki noted there's almost a dark whimsy to it, imagining the beast aggressively demanding its next meal, yelling, "Get over here, I want to eat you." It paints a tragic picture of a once superior creature reduced to pure ravenous instinct. The horrific fall from grace is super clear when you compare the two directly. On one hand, you have the everlasting dragons, immortal, majestic, covered in impenetrable stone scales. On the other hand, you have the gaping dragon. Its entire rib cage has basically opened up into a gigantic vertical maw that oozes acid. It's sprouted an extra pair of legs just to support the weight of its massive stomach, and its actual head has regressed into a tiny stubby little proboscis used just to sniff out prey. All right, Section 4, Slaying the Gaping Dragon. We know its backstory, so let's get into the combat briefing and figure out exactly how to put this thing out of its misery.
Make no mistake, guys, the Gaping Dragon is an absolute tank. Looking at the raw numbers, it boasts a massive health pool of over 4,600 in your first playthrough, which nearly doubles to just shy of 9,000 in New Game Plus. It hits incredibly hard with physical strikes and corrosive acid, so you're going to need a very solid, disciplined game plan.
So let's break down a reliable 3-step tactical approach. Step 1. Before you even think about walking through that fog gate, you absolutely must explore the upper levels of the depths and kill the channeler on the balcony. If you don't, he will literally shoot soul arrows at you and buff the dragon's damage during the fight. Step 2. Bait the stomach slam. Keep your distance, let it slam its massive torso into the ground, and watch as its teeth get momentarily stuck in the floor. Step 3. As it recovers and prepares to blindly charge forward, quickly move to its side or its tail and attack from safety. And actually, your top priority during this opening should be how you manage that tail. If you focus your damage on the very end of the tail while the dragon is recovering from a slam, you can sever it entirely. Cutting the tail off drastically reduces the reach of its most dangerous whip attack, making the rest of the fight so much easier. Plus, you get rewarded with the Dragon King Great Axe. Sure, it requires a massive 50 strength to wield, but it grants 20 points of fire and magic resistance, and its two-handed heavy attack unleashes a devastating shockwave. By sticking to its side, avoiding the corrosive acid it spits when its health gets low, and capitalizing on those slow, lumbering recoveries, you can absolutely slay this tragic echo of the ancient world. You now have the complete tactical intelligence required to survive this punishing ordeal, leaving you with one final question. Will you conquer the depths, cure the curse, and claim the tail of an everlasting descendant, or are you just going to become its next meal?